Welcome to the Clean Power Hour Live, bringing you the latest and greatest clean power news every other week with my guest, my co-host, John Weaver. Today we're going to be talking about Wind 5, Trump 0. We're going to be talking about RE Plus Northeast. We're going to be talking about the Luminous robotics release of the Pallet Lumi robot and much more. So welcome back, John Weaver. Good to see you.
Hi Tim, how you doing?
Twice in
Are you
1 week.
twice in 1 week? Went in person the first time. 3 times. We actually had dinner as well. So multiple visits. But you're
Yeah,
back.
Boston was great.
Yeah,
Um,
it's actually snowing slightly outside. At least a few minutes ago when I went to grab lunch. So, but
let's
it's light, very light snow.
let's give some highlights from RE Plus Northeast. If you've never been to RE Plus Northeast, just know that it's one of the more mature markets in the US, of course, with Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware kind of being at the front of that. And the show is in Boston. I think this was my fourth year at that show, so I've seen it grow substantially. It used to be in the Westin, and then it got into the main convention center, and now has been growing and growing and growing. But I would venture there was probably 1,500 people there, something like that.
All right.
Um, I don't know what the actual number was, but I got to spend a lot of time with Chint Power Systems. You'll get to see a lot of Chint content coming out as a result of that. And I did an interview with Costa Nicolau at Panel Claw and Dan Leary. So bringing back Dan Leary from Dina Watts. So bringing back some repeat guests from the pod, friends of the pod. But John, what were your takeaways?
Uh, I had a particular goal of talking, like business goal instead of reporting goal, of talking to racking manufacturers who are on the floor because we have a purchase coming up and I'm trying to do my best at figuring out what's best for these three projects. They're all very similar-ish. And so that's what it was, the team was there to talk to these people and it felt valuable. And then again, a couple of other business conversations. It was just nice. We got to shake hands with people and be like, "Hello, we are human beings. Nice to meet you. This is what we do," and it was cool. It felt valuable to go. I'll say that. Um, and then at dinner, I got invited to a nice dinner with U.S. Renewables, Josh and his team, and I was introduced to a guy named AJ, and I can't remember his company, residential guy, and he was so smart, and he was using tools, chat and whatnot, to build scripts to enable him to do solar business related tasks quickly. One of them included I can't remember the exact process, but getting the inverter map of the N-phase units easily and efficiently from the installation guy into the software. And it's not terribly hard. It's just a little bit annoying sometimes. There's scanners, there's better ways to do it. But just good conversations. And I got excited talking about solar with people. So it was fun. Felt like a big kid, just seeing everything. But it was also responsible conversations. So it felt like a valuable business thing for me. So it was cool. It was cool to go. And I'm, after going to Chicago, and I've never been to too many other shows. I have been to Chicago once though. And I should feel happy now. I used to make fun of our little show here in Boston, saying who wants to go to New England in February, but a bunch of people do. I mean, I went to a show in Chicago. It was like 5 degrees, man, and we played golf outside just outside of Chicago. Tim, how cool is that? And
In 5
foosball.
degrees?
It wasn't 10, it wasn't 15. How's that? But we were in Schlumberg, just
Oh, you're
outside of the
talking
city.
you're talking like Top Golf or
I think Top Golf, yeah, and in the machine, yeah, we weren't like actually playing golf. So so it was a good RE plus in Chicago. So good job RE plus. So great job filling out the space. So I guess going there is good for business for me, and it was nice. And so met
yeah.
a lot of people. It's good to see you, and good to have different types of conversations with manufacturers, like where words and ideas can flow a little bit quicker, easier, maybe. So
Yeah, and I really enjoyed our dinner with EOS,
yeah,
the zinc battery company, they seem to be making strides, which is really good to see. And yeah, we might bring some EOS content to our listeners here in 2026. We'll see. I've never covered EOS. I have covered some other zinc uh, companies, but we need options to traditional lithium ion. I don't have a problem with traditional lithium iron phosphate, but it's good to have options.
Options are good.
Should we talk about data centers, or why don't we
Let's talk
start?
about let's talk about Wind 5, Trump 0.
Yeah,
How's that?
before we do that, because this was Boston, I'm gonna put I got a quick clip of the open house from Luminous Robotics.
Oh yeah.
As my listeners know, I am an advisor to this little robotics company called Luminous that makes a pallet installation robot. It picks and places modules. Sorry, a module installation robot. I had
Yes.
pallet on the mind because they released a new version of the robot, which is a pallet carrying robot. So in their very original design, they had the forklift on the back of the main robot, the robot with the arm. But then they
Mhm.
realized that logistically that doesn't make sense because you need more pallets than you need the pick and place. So they kept them separate. And I will put this on screen now with a little luck. Um, and we'll get to see the release of the pallet Lumi, they call it, I think, and share screen.
There's a big facility being developed, started being constructed in the Middle East, where they announced that installation robots will be part of the whole of the project. Uh, as the way projects work there, this was like I think it was a multi-gigawatt facility. So it might be that um, we'll see how these robots fit, how many tasks they
Yeah,
go through, how many tasks they take over, how far down they become cost effective as the skill sets arise. Because it seems like it's becoming a thing, Tim. It really does. Check it
it
out.
does. Yeah, 2025 was kind of the explosion of robotics, and 2026 will just be an acceleration of that in the solar industry. So on the right side, you see the module picking robot, and then on the left side is the pallet Lumi, which picks up a pallet and then follows the other robot around, and they basically pair, and the pallet Lumi just trails the other robot. We didn't capture that in this clip, but I'll just play this one more time. And yeah, they've like tripled their headcount year over year. So you and I went to this open house a year ago, and it's just amazing to see the progress that they've made. They won a $10 million grant in Australia. They worked on a 250 megawatt, or a couple of 250 megawatt projects in Australia, and now they're doing some small utility projects here in the US. They had some customers there, kind of household names in the solar industry. Frankly, I won't name names, but
Yep.
um, so it's really good to see the robot evolving. It's a much sleeker, you know, form um, form factor now. Wouldn't you say, John? I mean, you
Engineering.
saw that. You saw it was a black bot last year at the
Yeah.
open house.
And it was a big chunky one. This one's been engineered a lot. It's had people staring at it, refining it, softening its curves, probably making it more cost effective with the way they are placing gear on the inside. So it's an evolving creature right now.
And one of their differentiators is the robot is low enough to the ground that it can drive completely under rows, so it can just traverse the array, which makes it quicker getting from A to B when it needs to go places.
All right.
Um, and it's also give a shout out to Charles Pimentel, who is now their chief commercial officer. So they recruited Pimentel from Earthos, and Pimentel is a co-founder of Earthos, and he's still an owner of Earthos. But he decided to do something else on a more full-time basis, and that's working as the chief commercial officer for Luminous. So congrats to the team and to Charles, and it was great meeting him. Did you get to meet him in the flesh while you were in Boston?
Nope. I was busy, kind of running around crazy. So
got it. All right, so we're going to talk about Trump Zero Wind Industry 5. We reported last week, that what was the project?
Vineyard
Wind, yes, was back moving forward, right? That construction restarted and they were installing the last turbine at Vineyard. But what is this 5-0 phenomenon now?
There were 5 wind farms under construction across the U.S. East Coast that were told to cease work during this. And we've chatted about it a couple of times, but during the last month or so. And these wind farms were told to shut down initially because they could affect radar. But that turned out not to be the case. And then so they changed it to top secret reasons. And then the wind farms fought back and said, hey, we are not going to accept the construction shutdown. We think some of them were saying this isn't a legal attack. It's just because the president has it out for us. And to some degree, I think that's what some of the arguments were. And I believe that's what the judges have now partially gone with in order to allow the stop work orders to be shut off.
Right. Yeah, so Trump administration had stopped all construction on offshore wind in the U.S. And now here's the 5th case where the judge is saying, sorry, we're going to allow that construction to continue. This is a photo of Block Island Wind Farm, but the story was about the Sunrise Wind Project off the coast of New York. That was the most recent ruling, I guess, right?
Yep. That was the 5 of 5. So
it's been a stop and a start. I don't know what they call it in the wind industry, right? We have the solar coaster. What is the up and down in the wind industry? I don't know, but theirs is a little more zigzaggy right now.
Yeah, this is the second time that these facilities have been stopped now, at least some of them. The Vineyard facility, I think, was stopped twice now, or this is the second time. So, this is, there's stats showing it's like $5 to $10 million a day to do this. And I also remember there's a boat with the Vineyard facility specifically because they're going through, they have 11 turbines where they have to replace 3 blades because the blades were part of, and we probably talked about this on the show, a batch that broke due to improper management in the factory. And so they're in the midst of replacing these. And this boat has to go somewhere else, like March 31st or March 1st, hopefully not March 1st. And so these things are slowing down this process. And by contract, this boat's supposed to go somewhere else. So it then becomes, how do you manage this? Do they shut down these turbines until, because they're all connected to the grid. Now, the last one's been installed. They'll probably turn it on and officially commission it, but they started feeding the grid like over a year ago now. So it's just, it's challenging. And these wind farms, they're taking on costs, millions, $5-10 million a day types of costs per plant.
Yeah. So let's talk about the this collapse of a wind turbine story in China. Just because it's
South Korea, I believe. South Korea.
Oh, South Korea?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, yeah, you're right. South Korea. A 20-year-old wind turbine in South Korea collapsed Tuesday, narrowly missing a car parked nearby on the side of the road. I'll put this on screen. And
scroll down. Scroll down to the GIF.
Yeah, they've got the video a little further down. So there's the video. And
oh, baby.
This is like the rear camera on the car, obviously, catching the turbine coming down. So 20 years, that's nearing end of life.
Yeah, I mean, we still can't. You can't just wave away a turbine falling because 20 years. I mean, that's a dangerous thing.
That's pretty crazy how it just fell apart in the sky too on the way
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, I didn't see anything which specifically said what occurred, like did a blade snap and do a thing, and so I don't know this, but this does happen. I mean, I recently read about a another 20, 30-year-old facility, I think in New Zealand, which lost a unit. I think it was like in the 23 to 24 year range. So um, and on our document, we can cover it later if we want, but a facility in Ireland, its first ever commercial wind farm from 91 is getting replaced. Now that's older than 20, that's 25, 34-ish, 33-ish years of age. So these things can last. This shouldn't be falling after 20 years, hopefully. But
Yeah,
that's what happens, I guess.
things do happen. Things do happen.
Yes, things do happen.
The stat that I love is that, stationary battery fires only occur as frequently as electrical building fires. So they're in the news and people are kind of freaked out about batteries sometimes,
Hmm.
but in the greater scheme of things, they're relatively safe devices
At
and getting
some
safer, of course.
I would like to see new research on the different the ratios of EV fires versus car fires, but normalized to car age and some other variables, so I
Yeah.
can feel more confident. Because I remember the first one came through, and one of the criticisms I saw, because I didn't really delve into the numbers, but the rate of fire EV versus gas was much in EV's favor. But I also know that the fleet of EVs is much smaller. Um, so or younger, actually, not smaller, doesn't matter, younger. And so that, when you have 20-year-old cars being driven like animals, like we do with cars, stuff happens just like with wind turbines.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. Let's talk about data centers because data centers are in the news a lot, because they're causing more grid demand and that's causing prices to go up on consumer power across the country for consumers and business owners. In some places, 30 to 50% in the last couple of years, consumers have seen price rises. So it's very significant. But ELPC out of Chicago, the Environmental Law and Policy Center, shout out to Brad Klein there, managing attorney, has written a story, The Case for Grid Friendly Data Centers in Illinois. And I'll get this on screen, but basically they're saying, look, this is great. If you want to build data centers, we want to figure out how to do that. What we don't want to allow is the traditional first come, first serve interconnection rules, though. What we want to do is we want to say, okay, data center developers, if you develop data centers and pay your own interconnection cost or transmission costs, bring your own clean energy, and protect local communities, with, uh, you know, controlling pollution, diesel from backup generators, noise, lighting, water use, etc. Right? This can produce what Brad calls the race to the top approach. And the analogy he uses in the story is it's TSA Pre-check for data centers. And so if we want to encourage data center developers to develop more environmentally friendly and facilities that aren't going to stress out the grid, that are going to bring more clean energy to the grid, and thereby give them an accelerated pathway to interconnection. And I think this makes a lot of sense. I know Illinois is not the only state with this idea. Um, and I think FERC has also issued a letter to the ISOs that they want to see accelerated interconnection rules for data centers because it is kind of a national security issue. Um, but yeah, in general, like yeah, we're going to get a lot of data centers. They don't have to be an environmental scourge, and they don't have to cause price spikes. The Googles and Amazons and Facebooks and open AIs of the world, they can afford to pay for these transmission and interconnection costs, right? It doesn't have to all get passed on to the consumer. What do you think about this, John?
So it's a cool story you found. I am interested, and I have been interested in the value of this giant energy suck slash battery slash energy resource that's sitting in the middle of the grid. Um, because not only, I saw something that said data centers are grabbing 200, 250 megawatt hours of batteries along with each facility in order to manage their demand so that they can, ease their demand during peak periods, and made me think about what this battery could be used for in other times. And they also have other gear on site. A bunch of them are doing Bloom units. They're
Right.
testing um, gear to offer them cheaper, more consistent electricity during complex moments, so that their hardware, their computes can compute. And that's it. Just interests me about what this asset is. These are little parts of a VPP, a virtual power plant, or not even, no, a distributed power plant. We got to say the right name. And so the things you're also saying, as you were saying it, it started making me think, man, if we could deploy data centers in just a smarter way, put some trees between them and some sound barriers or whatever between them and the humans. And I don't know. It was like, all right, that sounds cool. You're gonna have a big battery computer thing distributed. If you got a bunch of batteries associated with it, we should be able to use it, especially if it's on the transmission network. Maybe it can be used for local demand charge management, blunting the effects. Not only is it feeding the data center, it should, have a behind the meter connection and a direct to the grid connection for this little batch of stuff. So it has lots of throughput potential.
Yeah. So
Um,
just to recap Brad's story, we want to make them pay for their own infrastructure costs, require them to supply clean energy. If you're going to build a data center, build clean energy around it, or buy a virtual PPA from a big clean energy facility. It could be a both and. Protect communities and reward flexible, innovative designs with faster grid access.
yeah.
And then another quick aside here is that my dad wrote an article back in October about how you can build environmentally friendly data centers. Okay, the story is when data centers come to your town. And so just reach out to me if you want to get a link to that story by Peter Montague. But he basically chases down these simple facts that you can build data centers that don't use gobs of water. You can have a closed loop water cooling system for the data center. You can build them quieter, and and obviously you can build them in places that aren't going to impact humans as much as others. So we have to be careful about where we site these facilities and how we power them. And solar, wind, and batteries can power data centers. There's no question about it. It gives them an accelerated path, period, to having a data center, right? Because the queue is very long. Interconnecting a data center can take years because it's such a huge load. And so if they bring their own power, they can set up a microgrid effectively, right? And start running a data center. Now, the downside of that potentially is that they could power it with fossil fuels, and then you've got an air pollution hazard on site. And sometimes they site these places in urban areas like Colossus, the XAI data center in Memphis, Tennessee, which is quite famous for doing this, right? And it's powered by natural gas turbines. All right, let's move on. Stop sharing. What's the next story?
Uh, Quick one, but just an interesting one because it doesn't really have much of an effect on the world today, but it represents a big thing that occurred and interesting. China has extended import tariffs that it applied to US polysilicon, so the good stuff that makes our solar cells, back in like the Obama era, 2015-ish, which were like 50-ish%. And it pretty much at that moment put US companies out of business because China was the big purchasing market, and now the local Chinese manufacturers were price protected with incentives and with an import tariff. So import tariff was appropriate. China did it. We did it. This was in response to us putting an import tariff by Obama on solar cells, solar panels, solar this and that coming from China. And this is what led toward solar modules leaving China and being made in Southeast Asia in different places. So this is really old, and if it hadn't been extended, it probably wouldn't affect anything because these days Chinese polysilicon is the cheapest in the world. So with global pricing being more than double the Chinese pricing. But it's just an interesting little artifact of history showing tariffs surgically done can sometimes change the world, but other things have to be occurring, like China supporting its industrial policy, its local companies. So sort of like what the U.S. is doing. But the very next story shows about some of the dynamics of this, how you are allowed, quote unquote, to support locals. So that just an old tariff from way back in the day floating around.
The stat that sticks in my mind, and this came from Chris Lettman, who's a friend of the pod. He's been on the show, and he works for Imperial Star, a big solar panel maker. But he said 90% of the polysilicon is in the world is made in China.
Yes.
So you start with these ingots of polysilicon, and then you slice that up into wafers, and then the wafer gets manufactured into a cell, and then the cell gets assembled into a module. And so even when you have American-made cells, which we now have, there is an American-made cell industry. That poly is most likely coming from elsewhere.
So it is growing in the U.S.
It is. It is. Corning, right, is getting in the poly industry.
Yes. I think there's more poly than there is wafer. I think actually we have a big wafer hole that's bigger than poly, but I'm not certain exactly because I'm not an expert. But there's like it goes like look. It's not a straight up chart in terms of capacities.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to have those machines, those diamond wire machines, right, to make the wafers. And we don't make those machines in the U.S., I don't think.
So that's really interesting because we don't. And the import tariffs on all kinds of stuff from China, they don't apply to manufacturing machines. And that is another thing that the US recently extended. A couple months ago, I think November-ish, December-ish, the international trade body said, listen, we have no competition for solar hardware, solar cell, solar machine making machines. So we have to extend no tariffs on it, which is very interesting. So we know this.
Do we want to put this other wafer story
Well,
on?
we could. Well, it's not really a wafer story. What, at least this one. Oh, you want to talk about that one? Sure. Let's talk about wafers. Great. Let's talk about related to it.
Okay.
This is more than just wafers. This is actually a pretty cool, interesting discussion, and I do a little math to show off. So I want to show you off on Blue Sky afterwards. But
I want to know how to say that name first.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't help you.
Hong Yuan rolls out 40 micron engineering ready ultra thin silicon wafers.
40 micrometer.
Micrometer. Yeah.
Micrometer. 40. That's interesting because the current standard is in the 100 to 120-ish range.
Oh, so it's a third.
This is a third, yes. Now in the article, they talk about going through different versions. But since, I like the big and shiny, I'm going straight for the 1/3. And that's interesting because in a dime or 12-cent solar module, your cost of your wafer is probably, before the cell work is done, probably 2, 3, 4 cents. The cell work makes it 5 cents, six
Sure.
cents. So if we're chopping the wafer in half, no, in a third, maybe a half to a third. The polysilicon is chopped by a third. The energy and that goes, the electricity, the energy that it takes to make the ingot is a big chunk of the cost. And so if we can chop all that by 2/3, that's a couple of pennies off a module. That's
Yeah.
super cool. And it's not going to affect weight, because it's not that heavy anyway. But it's just a way for us to say, hey, and the curve of watts per gram has come down precipitously over time. So just kind of cool.
Yeah.
How that works.
Okay. Good stuff. Yeah, I love those photos and videos of them flexing the wafer. When it gets really thin, it gets flexible. Do we want to talk about the WTO story?
Well, we could talk about it at high level because we referenced tariffs earlier, talking about China just now. And it's very interesting, but the World Trade Organization has just ruled that the investment and production tax credit bonus, the 10%er, that was done under the Inflation Reduction Act, violates multiple articles of the General Agreement on Tariffs. And so, technically, per World Trade Organization membership, uh, the 10% bonus violates rules because it motivates people to use domestic stuff somehow versus international. And I wonder how that one explicitly breaks through when we look at, say, the 45X, which supports manufacturing. So interesting when we look at this global interweavings of how we motivate manufacturing, construction. As I learn more about history going back, surrounding our industry, there were so many different government supports for the program at different times for developing solar, getting it to move forward.
Well, one of the conversations that was very lively at RE Northeast is, a post ITC world. We are headed to a post ITC world. You can think that we're going to get the ITC back when we get a new administration, but a lot of people don't think that's going to happen. And they think it's actually okay because it's so complicated and it takes so many attorneys and tax accountants to make all that work that actually creates friction for our industry. And there are other things that we could do, like roll out federal legislation for community solar, right? That would be a very good boost to clean energy nationally and much simpler than bringing back the ITC. But if you're a solar company, you need to figure out how to survive and thrive in the post ITC world because it's going to be here, like it or not. We're already there with Resi, right? Unless you go third party ownership. This is driving two things. It's driving, prepaid leases in the residential market, and it's driving a mini boom in the commercial, industrial, solar, and battery market now. And eventually, it's driving a bust in both of those markets. I guess three things. And the other thing is it's going to drive more DIY resi solar, I think. And I just had a pre-interview with a company called Gigawatt, which is going head to head with Signature Solar on the DIY market. So they're going to sell kits of solar panels, racking, and batteries to consumers, and then the consumer can install it, or they can hire an installer, just like you do at Home Depot, John. When you buy a kitchen, right? You buy kitchen cabinets, and then you can hire a handyman to install the cabinetry for you. This is how Gigawatt is going to market. They're doing a fundraising, they're doing crowdfunding right now. I think they're trying to raise $1.4 million, but very interesting concept. I like this. I asked him, Deep Patel is the name of the CEO. I asked him, so if I got a 10 kilowatt solar system and a 30 kilowatt hour battery, what does that kit cost? And he said, oh, it's about $20,000. And then you go, yeah, it's about a third the cost of what an installer is going to sell me a system for, right? And so that puts solar within the reach of many, many, many more consumers, which is what we want. It's a both and, right? We still are going to have installers and a residential market, but I think this is a very good trend. And they're going to sell balcony solar when that, goes mainstream. And I think these platforms are very important. All right, so post
All right,
ITC
Tim.
world. I'm nursing a wicked cold.
All right.
So no, I'm not really all right.
Yeah.
I'm really ready to be back to health, but I'm surviving.
So I have like a collection of cool wind stuff, and you can pick which one to share, and I'll just kind of mix all three of them together.
We're gonna
But
have to rename the show, John.
cool wind stuff,
We're doing a lot of wind
coolwindstuff.com.
energy today.
But
What about
that
EV?
was the news. I got one down there. We could do a battery benchmark story, which
Yeah,
I thought
let's
was
talk about
great.
benchmark.
So Benchmark put out a nice little report with a bunch of cool stats, a big pretty chart, and the most interesting part of it, though, from my perspective, was the relative growth as an overall share of grid batteries. And
Mm,
I'm not explicitly certain what is the driver. Is it a speed up of grid battery uptake? And which is what I want the answer to be, and which is what's hinted at in the numbers, or is it a slowdown of EV demand? Which I don't think is the case because China is over 51%. Other countries are the same. The Northern Europeans, some of them at like 98%, like Norway, no longer an EV incentive, still at 98%. Like 3 or 8 diesels were sold, and everything else was an EV. So, um, so they said EVs are now 75% of global demand, is what the number says. And this is down from 77 and 79. Historically, I remember seeing charts saying the grid will at most be 10, 15, 20% of battery demand, and that EVs would dominate for like 10 years.
yeah.
But now already batteries are like the grid is what's the number? Best demand increased 51%. And so it's outpacing growth, and the grid's getting bigger. So that's the piece that I really thought was interesting in this report is, and just it follows the world that I want to see happening. So I got to be really careful. Is that it's the volume of grid batteries and the pace that they're being deployed, and so I'm really interested in that. And cars are growing too. I mean, EVs grew 26%. So it's not like they're not that's like S curve territory. We're right at the edge of S curve territory, 26%. So, if it's a sustained number. And so cars grew fast, but grid grid grew faster. And that
Yeah.
really interested me.
Yeah, I think we're awakening a giant in grid storage. I don't know in the greater scheme how this plays out. Obviously, EVs are going to be a big share of batteries. I mean, a Model Y has a 60 kilowatt hour battery. That's a very big battery. You can run your home for several days on a 60 kilowatt hour battery, and a big resi battery is 30 or 40 kilowatt hours. Uh, so vehicle to grid is becoming more important. I saw even Tesla is embracing vehicle to grid. They're offering that to Cybertruck owners now, and that's new. Musk has historically been very anti V to G for whatever reason.
Because he
Um,
sells batteries for houses.
yeah, that's one theory. That's one theory.
Eh,
Um, I'm just like, we need V to G, right?
I think so.
If you have an EV in your driveway, you want to be able to hook it up to your car to your house in an emergency. Just makes good sense. And think about school buses and city buses. Those are really useful batteries on wheels that you can run community centers or fire stations or whatever you need to run in the event of a major outage.
I mean, you really should just be coming home, plugging in your vehicle. and you'll have software to manage when you want it to charge beyond 80% or not. So this should be like what always occurs. So you shouldn't really have to think about the fact that you're connecting your power plant to your power grid to your house,
Right.
because it's all just part of normal day-to-day stuff. And it can be, and it will be for some. And for some people, let me rephrase it. For some people, it is right now. It's how they do work. They come home, they plug their car in. My brother does it. He's got an EV, and he doesn't have V2G though, but we've talked about it. So when I get him solar, it's gonna take a little bit longer. He'll get some solar, then it'll be cool.
Should we do one more story or should we call it a day?
Let's do one more story on wind, and I know
Great Britain?
what I want to talk about. Yeah, that's exactly the one I wanted to talk about. You could tell because my mouse thing is just moving around it on the screen.
British wind farms drive down day-ahead wholesale energy prices by almost a third in 2025. A story in Renew Economy. What's the story?
It's that wind is very valuable on the grid in the UK, and it has lowered the costs of energy projected. Do all the math at what its cost is versus the gas that it's displacing. And that's fundamentally what's getting displaced. Actually, it was coal. Coal's gone now. They had to bring in the gas, and even the gas is going down. And so there's less gas being run. But what's really matters is that wind is lowering the price of electricity in Great Britain, and it's coming more. They just had a massive, massive RFP. We covered it a few shows ago, and a massive RFP and more capacity, like 8 gigawatts worth, came in below price. I think was the big headlines about where the bids were. The costs for differences bids is what they are, and and so now we got batteries, which we get to talk about all the time. Hook it up to wind. We like that. It's a good combo.
Yeah. Yeah, I like this. I mean, it's proof that large scale renewables is good for the grid, it's good for consumers and business owners. And, you know, and that's why we need both, right? It's not always sunny and it's not always windy, but if you have wind and solar and batteries, that combination is pretty awesome. Nothing wrong with having some fossil fuels as backup, but truly we want to relegate fossils to the backup scenarios and not just burn, baby, burn, as we're doing today, unfortunately.
I hope that some of this strong wind that's being developed in Great Britain can get pushed into these interconnectors that are between the Europeans. I want to see there's little challenge from the Norwegians about from Norway about their cheap hydro funding the complex cost of specifically the German electricity market, which is very dependent upon liquefied natural gas and a little more expensive, and it driving up local prices there across the sea. And so, just watching how that evolves. There's 100 gigawatt wind hub we may have discussed here. I don't know if we did, that multiple countries are talking about working together, building together. So, wind is very useful there. I saw this is the wind show this week, Tim. No questions asked. I saw a cool visual that showed that of the world's 85-ish gigawatts of offshore wind, 30 was in the North Sea, and then like 45 was off the coast of China. So it's like those two chunks, 75 gigawatts out of 85 are right there. The rest is like starting to dot its way up the east coast of the US, maybe in Ireland or whatever, but that's it, like boom, boom. And so this is part of that. This is part of that big, massive collection of offshore wind expertise. And it's cool. Europe needs it.
All right. Well, check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Come to San Diego and meet me at InterSolar. I will be there on the trade show floor February 18th and 19th in just 2 weeks. And then after that, I will be in Milwaukee at NABCEP, March 16 to 19 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You can go to
Wisconsin.
cleanpowerhour.com and click the events tab and see all of the clean energy events happening in the US this year. We have a very full calendar there, and then also our webinar schedule. So, John, how can our listeners find you?
Commercialsolarguy.com. That is my website. I'm on LinkedIn a lot, so John Fitzgerald Weaver, and then I'm on Blue Sky as Commercial Solar Guy. If you want to like see all the news, if you want to see all the news that we're going to talk about here, it almost all comes from there, because that's how I collect my news. And then to build this show, I go through the cool news of the week or 2 weeks, and I said, boom, so you can like get a preview of what we're going to talk about. And then, but that's it, commercialsolarguy.com. And so you should get a hold of Tim in Illinois. He's going to build a bunch of solar plants. So give him a call.
Well, I was going to say, if you want to see John in the flesh, you have to go to Boston. He doesn't go to a lot of trade shows, but are you going to go to any other trade shows this year?
I will go to Solar Power SB, or the big one, RE Plus in Vegas in
Vegas,
November.
yeah.
Yes.
Which is
that's not for a while.
in November.
In like
this
November
year.
now. Yeah, it's shifted. Yeah, I guess we have more money, so we can afford to pay during the cooler season instead of going during the searing summer of 95 degrees. Where the Las Vegas people were happy when it broke under 90, and they were like, "Yay!"
All right, we'll see you in 2 weeks. And with that, I'll say, let's grow solar and storage. Thanks so much, John.